Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, just so you know who's here, Carl. First thing we have on the agenda today is to look at minutes from the previous meeting and to take a vote.
I did not set up the minutes or send them out. I took the minutes, but I haven't sent them to you guys.
Okay,
So we're not going to be able to vote tonight.
so we'll hold off until the next meeting date, which is Wednesday, the 16th.
Thank you.
Okay. On the agenda is to talk about the first quarterly report. Everyone has received a copy of that. And what we ought to do is to go through the document and talk about topics that come up so that we can address it. I would suggest that a couple things happen. That if you are keeping notes that are made in the discussion and you believe that it should change what is in the report, I would appreciate it if you would make a note as to the topic and what page it's on and send it to Carl so that he has it for the minutes. And I would also like a copy of that email so that I have the document as well. Does that make sense to everybody? We're saying yes, Carl?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Saeed, I got it. Nancy, I always see you when you say yes. So that's good. Okay, so let's take a look at the document. Starts out with the history of what happened with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee coming into play, and that would have been initially on the 27th of October. And so what you have under the first listing are the names of the people who were selected and the roles and responsibilities that we're responsible for the DEI community. We also look at the definitions of the words, and here we have the words that we've chosen from the thesaurus for diversity, which is variety, assortment, multiplicity, mixture, and the legal definition for ethnicity and race, which comes from federal legislation. And then we compare the results for the total number of people color percent with the Caucasian percent. It goes on page 2 to look at the definition of equity, inclusion, policy by rule and contract, and procedure. The definitions were discussed and adopted and voted by the committee. On page 2 at the bottom, we look at the strategy that has been developed. And it's for the committee to launch a strategy to assess efforts which demonstrate the town of Burlington's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the community.
BJ, pardon the intrusion. The document that you're reading off of or you're summarizing, I haven't received that document via email or via anything, I guess, because
I sent you a copy of the document on Friday.
on Friday.
I then sent you another copy this afternoon around 4:30 or 5:30 before the 6 o'clock because I saw your email.
Oh, I missed this email, BJ. I see it now. I see it now. Okay, thank you. Apologies for the interruption.
Yeah, that's all right. I sent it to Nick last Wednesday, a week ago.
Uh-huh.
And after we talked, then another copy was sent out on Friday afternoon.
Yep, I missed that email. I see it now. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just wanted to make sure everybody had a copy of it.
And also too, BJ, just to clarify, what you sent at 5:43 is just the 3 theory strategy for the town, just that singular page. It wasn't the entire.
Sorry. That was today.
Correct.
Okay, I sent the wrong document today. It should have had the 13 pages, which is what I sent last Friday.
But say you had the full document you're tracking.
Yep, I'm downloading it right now.
Okay, just want to make sure that we're all looking at it. And then while you're pulling that up, I guess this is more of a question to the committee. Do we want to take this and question comments along the way? Do we want to walk through it once, so that way it's just all on public record as a singular document, and then go back for questions and comments? How do we want to tackle this?
What do we choose to do? Either way is fine with me.
I would recommend taking it section by section. That way we can tackle it and move forward. Because I mean, we did agree that we probably won't be able to do it all in one sitting, right? So that's why we discussed meeting with the select board in like 4 weeks or so time. Does that make sense? Do folks agree with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that approach.
I don't know that I agree with that approach, because I thought today we would be looking at the document that we have prepared. And for the next meeting coming up, that is where we will look at what should be on the diversity scorecard and examine that document as well, separate from this one.
Right. So tonight we're going to walk through this document, but we're going to do it in sections so that we can comment along the way, as
Yeah.
opposed to walking through it in its entirety and then going back for questions.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's my suggestion.
That we just go section by section.
Yeah.
Right.
That's fine, because I think the next meeting we'll look at the scorecard and what should be in that document, which is separate from this one.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
Okay. So are we ready to look at strategy on page
So
2?
my only comment to the opening of this was, that we should consider including our mission statement and charge in our opening where we introduce the committee. I mean, I say introduce for formality's sake. They know, our names. That way it's just, our mission statement and our charge are our guiding light. This document is obviously the initial efforts of that. So as a reminder to the select board of what they charge us with to begin with, it wouldn't be bad to include that in an upfront, along with stating who the committee makes up.
Have we seen that charge in writing?
I hope so. It was sent to everybody when we formed this committee. It has our mission statement and charge.
So that would be a part of the minutes? Is that what you're suggesting?
I mean, it was never formalized as minutes. It was voted on by the select board to form this committee, and then shared with each member of this committee when we all accepted our post. And I believe I could be wrong, but in our very first meeting, we did review them. I could be wrong. I have to go back and watch the actual meeting. I can pull it up real quick if we want to review it. Let's see. All right, so the posted mission statement was in alignment with the select board's mission statement. It is the mission of this subcommittee to strive to recognize and celebrate the diversity of our community while ensuring that all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, education, disability, age, sexual orientation, or gender identity, and socioeconomic status are respected and valued, because our differences do not divide us, but rather strengthen us. And then the charge set forth for us was to evaluate and develop framework for DEI subcommittee, from which several strategic initiatives and actionable items can be developed and presented to the select board.
Okay, so if you could forward that, we could put it at the beginning of this report. Is everybody okay with that? Because I don't recall seeing that before. Thank you. Is there any other suggestion for the first part, which are the definitions of the words? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Policy, procedure. Are we on to strategy now? We're saying yes? Okay. All right. The first step is to gather written documents and analyze the data. And that's what we've accomplished thus far. The second strategy is to meet and suggest to the board for amending the mission statement for the board to include diversity, equity, and inclusion. Are there any suggestions for that? The third is for the DEI committee to engage with executive leadership for the town of Burlington as they address diversity, equity, and inclusion, policy, procedure, and practice, and to support their efforts. And we're counting on the select board to introduce us to those individuals. The fourth step is for us to create the communication with the select board and members of the Burlington community to identify and discuss DEI's ongoing forward movement to achieve goals, to annually measure and produce the Burlington Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Scorecard, which displays all efforts and results for the town of Burlington, and to develop and implement the strategies to sustain Burlington's diversity, equity, inclusion results, which demonstrates everyone's strength who is connected to this community.
Two questions, BJ. How are you defining Burlington the community at large? I'm assuming you mean the community at large here, right?
It's the town of Burlington.
So the general population?
That's the way it's documented in every report we've received.
Okay, so then open communication between the select board and members of the board. So I guess then I don't follow the first bullet. Could you explain what you mean by that?
The open communications between the select board and members of the Burlington community. You mean
So
residents or business? Is that what you're looking for in a definition?
exactly. So what I'm grappling with here is so you're suggesting that we would meet with the select board on a quarterly basis to help the select board openly communicate with the community at large in Burlington, or to develop, I guess, methodology for doing so? Is that what you mean by this bullet?
I was thinking that the community comes to us when we have a meeting. They're listening to us as we talk about the quarterly report. They would listen to us as we talk about the results from a diversity scorecard for the town of Burlington.
Okay.
So I was not limiting it in that fashion. If you're looking for other language that would explain that, I'm open to hearing it.
Yeah, because my interpretation of that bullet was very different from what you just explained. I thought what you were saying here was that we would help the board in figuring out a methodology to have open communication between themselves and the community at large, so that they could understand the issues, DEI issues that the community is facing. That's the way I read that bullet.
I just meant the words that were here. That's documented on paper. I didn't interpret it any other way.
Okay, then my recommendation is, or my suggestion is, we should rephrase this.
Then send us your recommendation.
Okay.
So, Saeed, if I can just jump in for a second,
Sure.
is it easier to operate under the assumption that when this committee goes before the select board, it is in a public format, and therefore these quarterly updates that this committee wants to provide would automatically be in the public and include the community, and therefore we wouldn't even have to mention anyone other than the select board, right? Like, I think that if bullet one was, to open a consistent line of communication with the select board, we could even say in a public setting, i.e. the meeting. I think that might help negate any question around who's allowed. It's a public meeting, anyone's allowed.
That's fine.
And that way, because again, like, it's not like we're asking them to hold public hearings. It's not like we're doing town halls, or we're doing, any particular, market research listening exercises per se, to say that, like, we're trying to engage the public very specifically around a particular strategy or topic. We just want them to be involved in the conversation that we intend to have, whether or not they participate. Does that kind of get at what we're circling here?
Saeed?
I'm not sure, Nick, to be honest with you, because again, my read of this sentence was very different from what BJ was explaining. So maybe it's my lack of understanding of the English language. English is a second language to me. So I read this to mean that we would help the board. We would meet with the board on a quarterly basis to come up with some sort of a mechanism where there would be open communication between the board and the community at large. That's the way I read that sentence.
Right. And I see how you're reading it that way. So totally on board with the understanding of where we're not aligning. If we're to operate under the assumption of how BJ rephrased it, though, this is more of a, conversation between everybody. Would my rephrasing of it help in that way? Because I think that, like, where you interpreted it was like, that's more of like a strategic actionable thing. Like,
Right.
If we want, to help the board engage in those kinds of conversations with the public, then that's like more of like a strategic, like, okay, this is a recommendation we're making, as opposed to these quarterly meetings being, the updates that are also open to the public.
Right.
Can I just jump in? I mean, I think it's just reading it as a verb versus like an item. So could we just write ensure open communication or open communications? Would that fix the problem?
Well, I don't think that was BJ's intent, which is, I think, where I'm going. I mean, yes, I think it would help clarify it, but there's I think BJ's intent of having open communications between us and the select board, and then there's open communications between the select board or the town of Burlington and the residents and businesses. And I think that I mean, they're obviously two very different things, but I think that the first was BJ's intent, and BJ, correct me if I'm wrong, and the second was the initial interpretation, which I'm trying to, I guess, reconcile.
So maybe it's just a phrasing change. I think we all get it's just we want to be transparent, right? And
Right.
make sure it's available to the public.
What if we change it to increase or help increase? I don't want to get too bogged down here, but
I still like the phrase open communication between the select board. And so the note that I've written is it's DEIC, the select board, and the community. our connection is directly to the select board. But I was implying that we should also include the community as part of that as well. The select board may agree or disagree. I don't know.
Well, no, I mean that's the thing, is that we're doing it as a part of a public meeting. So
Yes.
the selectmen can't disagree. It has to take place in the public. Um, so I mean, I think that's where like this hang up is happening. Like it has to be a public meeting. Therefore, the Burlington community can be as involved as they wish to be. So I think that under the notion of what these quarterly meetings are between the DEI and the select board are intended to do, the first bullet is that we are trying to open communications between our committee and the select board, so that there is more open communication between what we are trying to achieve and the board that established us.
So if I said open communication between the select board and the diversity and inclusion committee and open to the public, or quarterly meetings open to the public.
You don't even have to say open to the public. I think that's just it is.
By law, it is. That's what you're saying, right, Nick?
Right. Yeah,
Just like our meeting is open to the public.
exactly.
So then we're just talking about open communication between the select board and us. And the option is there whether the town wants to participate or not.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, again, like if we're rolling back into the intent of the quarterly meetings themselves, right, and we're rolling back into our charge as an advisory committee to the select board, then yes, then these meetings are intended for us to open communications with the select board to begin having open lines of dialogue around the topic of DEI. And if the public wants to attend those, select board meetings and listen on what we're delivering information, just like they can log into this or watch it on Facebook later, or however they engage with these meetings, they can. And then, as an outside of the quarterly meetings altogether, as a strategic actionable goal, if we want to specifically engage the community in conversations to hear more from them, that's something that we can ask of the select board and do. But specifically around these quarterly meetings, I'm just saying that that's kind of, I hope I'm making sense. Like I feel like I'm talking in circles, and I apologize.
I guess the question is, do we need that bullet then if everything's public anyways? But I do appreciate why you included it. That, we want this to be a transparent, open, public process between us, the select board, and anyone who wants to get involved with the community.
I want it to be inclusive of including people from the community.
Yes.
Nick, what's the
That's why I said it the way I did.
what's the normal public attendance you get at select board meetings, Nick?
Low. I think. I mean, it's a
So,
handful.
I would lean towards leaving it in just to remind us that, there are ways that we have discussed in previous meetings about increasing the communication, not just with the select board, but with town entities in general to increase that inclusion, and make people more aware of what's going on.
I would prefer to leave it the way it is rather than excluding, because I want people to be included in discussions that we have.
Would it help to say open communications and then about DEI? I don't know.
Maybe you just there you need back to I think it was Nancy, you had said just adjusting the verb. Maybe it's to foster open communications.
Yeah, like or something like that.
Or just something that kind of gets us to the notion of better transparency.
Yep, I agree with that.
Send a note.
Sure.
Any other comments about step 4?
Bullet 3, annually measure and produce the Burlington DEI scorecard. So our remit is for a year. So unless the select board decides to extend our remit or renew it, we really can't help them with this step, right? On an annual basis.
What we're going to produce can be done annually. It's up to the select board whether they want it or not. But that's what we're striving to do.
I get that, BJ. My point here is that this committee, we have been convened for a limited time, right? Our tenure is for a year. So, October 22 approximately. So if the goal is for this committee to annually measure and produce the DEI scorecard, my point is we won't be able to do that until and unless the select board says, yep, you can continue, your tenure has been, increased or it's indefinite or whatnot. That's my point here.
Yeah, this was this I had an initial hang up around this as well. I think that if we wanted to adjust the language to avoid the assumption of longevity of this committee, just for the sake of just not knowing what's going to happen in a year's time, or what the select board's larger decisions are going to be, this book could be easily amended to talk about sharing and educating the select board and the town administration around the use of the scorecard, as a tool, right? And that way, regardless of the existence of this committee, if the scorecard is something the select board adopts, it can be produced and then gauged on an annual basis.
Well, maybe we don't even need to mention the annual basis right now and just remove annually for now.
Annual should be in there. And when you work with the leadership of the town, they would supply the information that could be put into the scorecard on an annual basis. It doesn't have to be this committee to do it, but somebody has to take over the responsibility because that's the guidance that we get on an annual basis. And
So
to do it
Right.
once,
But the metrics around the scorecard itself against what step 4 is aligned to, which is the quarterly meetings, are I think where the hang up is, right? It's like if you were talking about just the scorecard itself and it's need to function on an annual basis, 100% agree. Under the auspices of this particular step in the strategic alignment of this needing to be these being quarterly updates of the DEI and the select board, having it be annually measured and produced doesn't align back to that. So I think like I completely agree that the scorecard would need to be tracked on an annual basis and should be, much like I think most scorecards and review metrics. But to Saeed's point around this being, a limited time for this committee, the time that we have with the select board should be used in terms of, I think, education and awareness around the importance of measuring and producing a scorecard as a strategic tool.
Or we're making this for annual use. We're making it
Exactly.
for annual use.
So
Instead of saying annually, because then it makes it sound like we're in charge no matter what.
Right.
Exactly. That's exactly again my interpretation. So if I may interject, my suggestion is we can just add to the beginning of the sentence, develop a strategy to annually produce, measure and produce the Burlington DEI scorecard.
Well, would the scorecard change much from year to year? I guess that's the other part. So if we just produced it, then it could be
change from year to year. Yes, it does.
All right.
The data that's in it, the policy, the procedure, the practice. What we have done by gathering in step 1, the data that currently exists is all that we have. It's not enough to measure where we should be. The scorecard is the balance for where you're going. That's why you have an annual presentation of the results and who is invested and is engaging and produces results and those that don't.
Okay,
So
that makes
what
sense
you
to me.
want to measure. And so annual is what you do on a basis. It could be a person who's hired to do it, but we are laying the foundation for that by the work that we're doing in a year.
Right. I think we're all in agreement with that. I think we're all hung up on the alignment to the quarterly meetings that this step is talking about.
Well, nothing has changed in the steps because the next step is to meet with the executive leaders in the town around diversity, equity, and inclusion and the efforts they should make. And we're there to support them.
But to Saeed's point, where we only know that we're here for the remainder of our time. So if we're only talking about, and again, like if we're only talking about step 4 and we're talking about the quarterly meetings that this committee is going to have with the select board, then during those meetings, our intent for the scorecard is to educate and suggest implementation of the scorecard for annual tracking of and to produce and measure on an annual basis, right? Like I think that we're flipping it around and to have it make more sense as it pertains to our current charge and not the longevity of, because once you drive into that specific strategic tool of the scorecard, we can talk about it, more specifically around how it can change and the importance of it, and like that's where all that lives. But as it relates to our quarterly updates with the select board, I think what we're trying to say is that we just want to be clear that we, from these quarterly meetings, are not going to be annually measuring and producing the scorecard. We're going to be educating and hopefully, or I should say, educating and creating awareness around the importance of the scorecard for hope that they implement it, right, on an annual basis.
Well, sorry to interject, but I would actually go a step further, Nick, and say that we would help develop a strategy for the town so that on an annual basis, a scorecard can be completed, and then the same process or same, I guess, so it repeats, in other words, right? So we show them how it's to be done. We help them do it the first time around, for example, and then then we recommend that they implement it on an annual basis. That's the strategy.
Yes.
To come full circle.
Yep. Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Step 3 has the language in there that you're referring to.
3 has that language. Okay.
It's to work with the executive leadership around diversity, equity, and inclusion, policies, procedures, and practices, and to do goal setting for people who perform working for the town. It's all written there.
Okay.
Right.
So,
for the life of this committee.
Yeah.
right. So again, I get what you're saying, BJ. That makes perfect sense. But then step 4 contradicts step 3 then. Because again, we have been excuse me, we have come together as a committee for a 12-month period, right? We cannot annually measure and produce the DEI scorecard because we do not know if we'll be here next year or not. So do you follow? Is it clearer now as to what the issue is with bullet number 3?
I think that step 4 is practical the way it's written. Nick is the one that says that we're here for a year. So we're going to address it in a year. And it's to work with the executives to get it put into place and to communicate the progress as we go to the select board on a quarterly basis. We are saying that step 3 is in conflict with step 4.
Right.
And I don't see that. What are you referring to?
So so step 3, when I said that we are essentially, we should be strategizing with the board to figure out a way or a methodology to come up with, to measure and produce the first Burlington DEI scorecard, right? To that point, you said step 3 is what it already states that. Okay, perfect. Now, if we then go back to step 4 again and look at bullet 3, bullet 3 says we are going to be meeting with this select board on a quarterly basis to annually measure and produce the Burlington DEI scorecard. Okay,
That's correct.
I
What we
think
will
what you're
be doing,
I think what you're trying to say is that on a quarterly basis, we will meet with them to put step 3 into to come up with practical steps for step 3, right? Not that we'll be meeting with them on an annual basis, on a quarterly basis to annually measure the scorecard, measure and produce a scorecard.
step 4 is not out of line with what we're doing in step 3.
I'm sorry, I disagree, because my interpretation again is very different from what's written there.
When we finish our meeting today and approve this document to move forward, I will send you a copy of a diversity scorecard with the permission of the institution.
Mm-hmm.
It's already prepared. So we know, based on that, what we will do to create the scorecard here.
Mm-hmm.
Step 3 is necessary to begin to gather the appropriate data, which we do not have now. And that is why we're meeting with the executives to talk about their part of this data that we're gathering and what they're doing in their organization. That's how it will be put together. And our progress as we go through this year is to communicate with the board what our success is in doing this. So that by the time we get to the end of this year, we will have the first diversity scorecard for the town of Burlington.
Okay, so then
To then measure on an annual basis.
okay, so then the goal in step 4, bullet 3, is to obtain the data that we need to produce the first Burlington DEI scorecard.
Yes.
That's not what the bullet says here, BJ.
I think we can fix this by just saying for annual use. Because I see that the annually part is what's making people have pause, because we might not last more than a year, and also at the beginning of step 4 it says on a quarterly basis. So if we just say the same thing but then for use on an annual basis, or to be performed on an annual basis,
I like that.
would that be okay with everyone? Suggestion to fix this.
Yeah, I like.
I think we all understand what we're doing. It's just, again, it's like semantics and wording, so we just want to be clear.
Okay. So I'll take a look at what is submitted to see whether that's more appropriate language. But I want to make sure that we connect with the select board, because if we don't make the movement that we do with the senior executives, they are the one that can address that for us. We're a committee. And if they decide not to abide by what we're saying, that's what the select board needs to know. That's why we're meeting with them on a quarterly basis. We're either making progress or we're not. Any other comments on the steps?
Not from me. Thank you.
Okay. What I did at the middle of page 3 was to begin step 1 with the data that was gathered. And here we documented with whom we met, the data in a summary format, the documents. Page 4, we talk about the meeting on January 19th to meet with the town clerk and the director. Any comments there?
My only comment here is I think that it is prudent to call that there are 21 documents with no mention, but I also want to call out that we as a committee or we as a town only have control over 15 of them. I think it's at least, you know, it's also prudent of us to acknowledge what we do have authority over as a town. So, you know, if we want to say of the 21 documents, there's no reference to language, diversity, equity, and inclusion. 15 of those documents are town or union documents. Just to call it out. I'm not sure I'm wording. I'm just throwing it out there.
The documents that are listed here are the ones that do not address discrimination or have language about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yep, I absolutely agree and acknowledge that. I think that this document should also acknowledge that of those 21, only 15 of them are something that we can do something about at this current state. Right? We have no authority to change state or federal law, but we do have authority to change town bylaws and negotiate in contracts with unions. So when you total up the town clerk and the human resources documents under town and union, you hit 15. So
you
again,
want to add a sentence at the bottom of sources about a footnote for 15? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just in the second paragraph of on top of page 4, it opens with the 21 documents. I'll just include something in that paragraph that says something about 15 documents of which we have I don't know if we want to say immediate control over or I don't know if immediate is right, but maybe just control over or something along those lines. I don't have the wording.
I got that. Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, for the bottom of page 3, the human resources documents, I don't know if I missed it, but I didn't get those 3 US Census documents. I don't know if that's just me that didn't get them or I missed something.
I'll send you a copy.
Okay.
Joanne may have sent it to me, so I'll check.
Okay. Thank you.
Any comments about the union contracts on page 4? No? Page 5, Burlington Public Schools. And there you have sections. There are 5 sections. Any comment? Burlington Public School website. There are questions that are there.
I believe we can get the answers to those from the school information office. I can reach out tomorrow.
The data we have came from Joanne Faust.
Right. And I'm still hung up on the what she gave us. It just looks like it looked like a printout of a search of the website. I'm not sure how valuable it was. I know that it's just what she gave us, but I think
That's
that
what
if,
she gave us.
right, if we reach out to I'm blanking on the woman's name that runs the information office up at the high school, but I believe that she can give us the answers to both of these questions.
Well, data that I didn't have, I mentioned it to Joanne already,
Uh-huh.
and I still had the questions.
Okay.
And this is just what we have that surfaced.
Right.
It's not that anything's being ignored.
Right.
Same thing for the affirmative action plan, which was done October 6, 1986.
We have these answers.
It wasn't in anything I received because I requested.
Well, Joanne said during our conversation that it hasn't been updated since 1986. So that answers question number one. And then in an email follow-up, Joanne said that initially she identified Chris Hannafin as the affirmative action person, and then she corrected herself in her email and said that no, he is the disability access officer, and that when this was put into place in 1986, we actually didn't even have really human resources at the time, but that you know she is that person. So Joanne Faust is our affirmative action officer by de facto. So if we want to just add those answers into the questions, I think it would just help further along the conversation.
And I did go back to her and ask again for additional information, and there wasn't any. So we have all that there is. And again, we're just measuring where are we.
What do you mean? She answered the question.
When I said to Joanne, I asked about the data, and she gave me what she had available.
Right. I'm talking specifically about these two questions which she answered. The affirmative action questions.
Yeah, the bottom page 5.
Yes, she did answer that. Thank you. We're on page 6. Nick, you mentioned to me about an organizational chart.
Yep. So what Joanne said is as much as we have. We have the lists of positions, and each department will have their own individual list. We do not have one full, complete Town of Burlington organizational chart.
Correct.
Not yet, anyways.
At the bottom of page 6, I have the results from the data that we received. Nancy, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I sent everyone a PDF of the summary I made because the stuff we received wasn't that easy to parse. It was kind of incomplete. And then right before our previous meeting, Joanne had sent us those numbers, which I wish she had done initially. But then I further clarified, okay, so what are those totals? So then from those totals, I got the percentages and made those graphs. So if people are okay with it, I'm suggesting that we take those tables and graphs I made and copy paste in there if that is acceptable. And those are numbers double checked with Joanne. And then the other section is just from the US Census. I have the different locations that we have here, but now there's a graph and it's the 2020 numbers, and additionally one more graph and table that compares 2021 town employees to 2020 US Census. So if people had a chance to just glance at those, I just wanted to make it a more clear summary, and I like the visual. It's pretty obvious here we have room to grow, but it just makes it more just right there to see. So my ask was just if people are in agreement, if we can input my corrected data.
I'm always in support of a good chart or graph, so I support that.
I disagree with the support because if you're using 2020 data, it doesn't come out until October 21. Therefore, when this information was produced, that data was not available. It's based on the 2010 until the consensus is updated, which is a year after it's collected. So the data that I provided is based on 2010.
Okay, those are the documents I didn't receive for the census. And then I think we already talked about how that first column for Burlington was the employee data, not the actual population data. Because the rest of them are population numbers, so to be
Based on the data that Joanne gave me. I didn't make
okay,
it up.
that's yeah, I know. So that's why I was saying I clarified some numbers with her because it was a bit of a mess, and I wanted to make sure we had the right number because even like the 2017, 2019, and 2021 percentages aren't correct based on what the full complete numbers are that she sent me are.
If you want to change the Burlington data, I'll consider that. But we have to use the 2010 census data to calculate. Therefore, it can't be updated to the charts you presented.
Okay, and then that's fine. Then is the Burlington column with the 95.8% white and 4.1% people of color correct for 2010 for population?
Yeah, that's the data that Joanne gave me.
For town
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah, but that's town employees. For numbers of the demographics, it should be around 71.5% white and 28.5% people of color for population. And the reason because if you're you can't compare the employees to the other populations, so we should be comparing all populations. And then that table should just be town of Burlington population demographics, not employees.
I use the US Census data in order to do the calculation for 2019 and 2017 for Burlington. And that's how I compared Burlington to Boston to Massachusetts to the US. That's US Census data.
Sorry, BJ, hang on. So is the Burlington column data that you tabulated, or is that the data provided by Joanne for town employees?
Provided by Joanne.
Of town employees.
The data she gave me was for 2017, and it did not have EEO4 or EEO.
Okay. But we had this conversation last time. We can't just compare town employee data to general population census data.
Can we just add a column with Burlington 2010 population data then? And then
Sorry?
Can we just add a column next to the Burlington employee data and just insert another Burlington column with the population? Then that would make sense.
So you want to compare not residents, but only population who worked in Burlington.
No, I think the first column you have, so this is the first column under that town of Burlington, Massachusetts employment data, that Burlington one that says 1.3, etc. and the bottom's 95.8 Caucasian.
Yep.
That's employee data, so I just am suggesting inserting another for Burlington, so that's Burlington population. Because it's not 95.8 and 4 for the population demographics. It's closer to 75-25 or something.
May I suggest that we talk with Joanne about the data that she gave us? Because that's on a report that's from her. And if she only used who was employed,
Okay,
then
can
it
you
doesn't compare.
send me those, because I think I'm missing those census documents too. So that's why I didn't have those specific numbers. But and maybe it's an error on her part. So that's doesn't seem quite right. Yeah, I mean, I'm an engineer and scientist by background. I'm very anal about data. So I just want to make sure we have the right numbers and that it's correctly presented.
Let's look at the Burlington number. I will talk with Joanne about that. However, we need to compare the data rather than trying to figure out who is employed here by the town of Burlington in the public school or through the government.
Right, but if the data is not either clearly labeled or apples to apples, then what we're sharing is not a good data set.
But I will check with Joanne to make sure that we're comparing the right thing. Rather than having us recreate the data and interpret it, it should come from her based on what she gave me. And if she's saying that it's the wrong analysis, then I can accept that.
But I
But
mean,
we can't revise what she's demonstrated and say that it's incorrect, it should be done another way, because we have the foundation to be able to do that. We're just looking at the data that she gave me. And if
Okay.
I misinterpreted, then yes, we will look at the numbers, but it will be for Burlington.
Okay, I did follow up with the one that you said that you're okay with changing, and that one I did specifically follow up with her, and I can forward you that email if you would like. As far as the census data, because that's publicly available, that's also why I know those numbers aren't correct for demographic. And again, I don't know if that's where that error was from, but that's why I'm pointing that out.
Okay, send it to me and I'll talk with Joanne, but we'll go with what she provides. That's already been collected. And it has to be based on 2010. We're on to page 7. Comments?
so generally speaking, I don't believe that we should include any religious um, attributions to the efforts that we're making here. And I say that as a Catholic. I believe in a very strong separation of church and state. And I think that it's entirely possible that by including the 10 commandments, we could in fact be not being as inclusive as we would hope for anyone who just isn't Catholic. So it would be my recommendation to remove the 10 commandments from this document.
Other comments?
I agree with that statement.
Yes, but I agree also, but I appreciate the sentiment to say why I think there should be a why. But can we think of a more secular source? I think the references to the Constitution are great. As a civics teacher, I love it. But I agree with Nick that I'm not comfortable having it in there.
Carl, I had the same. I actually felt like the using the Constitution was enough, to be honest. I mean, like, it's the foundation of everything this country was built on. And if that's not a why enough reason to maintain the notion of equity and inclusion for all moving forward, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, talk about having pride in one's country. It's like this is what we were founded on, and we're continuing that, by refocusing and addressing issues as they present themselves, and or hopefully, before they present themselves. And that, I mean, that in and of itself was the why for me. I felt like the Ten Commandments was, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've said it before, over the years, right? Is that of the 12 major religions, all of them have some version of the golden rule, which from a moral ethical standpoint is wonderful. And if we wanted to even mention just that statement notion of the fact that like the golden rule is kind of pervasive through religion on a global scale, I think that that's even more inclusive, because it's that notion of doing unto others as you would want undone to yourself. But to focus it specifically on one religion, I think, is where we start to not include folks.
So are you suggesting that we take out the 10 Commandments and use the golden rule?
I think that if folks feel like just the Constitution isn't enough, then that would be my recommendation to offer up as a way to say, beyond just the founding of this country, but the way that people have been thinking for thousands of years from an ethical standpoint. We can use that as a part of the why, but I do but personally believe that the Constitution and our reference to our history, again, from like an ethical and foundational standpoint, was enough for me.
Yeah, I also agree that we should remove the 10 Commandments. Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate to have a religious reference in this document, especially a DEI report. And I do agree and like the mention of the Constitution as a reference. The other possibility is to include a mission statement that might include some of the things we think should also be in the select board mission statement. Even something like looking at the Burlington High School mission statement, maybe that could be something too. I think there is more mention of DEI in there. I need to double check that. Thanks.
What's nice, BJ, that in what you wrote, the inclusion of the parts of the Constitution that you reference show a progression of the way that this country has become more inclusive. And obviously, we have a lot more work to do, which is one of the reasons why we're gathered tonight. But I think that it fits nicely to show that this is what has been done in the history of our country, and this is the next step in that progression.
Yeah, I really appreciated that chronology. That was really informative, and it's a great way to show, the power of like working on this and just how we build upon what's already been done and keep striving forward.
When you get to the top of page 13, that's where I have the word draft. Because we were talking about looking at the mission statement from the select board and then creating an opportunity for something for them to consider that they might add or stimulate their thinking or kick them in the ass to get them to do it.
I think
Can we say that in this document?
that we're gonna do a right old ass kicking. I think to that notion. I know we'll get there, but to the notion of building and working toward the mission statement, the fifth bullet of the current select board's mission statement is, I think, where the interjection of our language would come. Right now it reads, to create a sense of community within the town, to develop the quote soul of the community while recognizing the mixed diverse nature of the community. Right. I think that was the first step, from a mission statement standpoint to move toward, the notion of, equity and inclusion. And it's, it's not there, right? But I think that like as we look to draft some language, we should keep in the back of our minds that is probably the bullet that we're looking to update.
Do you know who wrote that bullet point? Because I'm just wondering why those things are in quotes and
That stuck for me too.
Yeah, it's been
that it means. I don't know.
it's
Yeah,
been a
clearly it
very
needs
long
work.
time. It's been a very long time. I mean, look, a lot of these documents haven't been touched since the 80s. So no, I think it's probably been 20 years, if not more, since.
Whoever did it's not there.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I had initially drafted some other mission statement bullets. So I mean, we're already in the process of working to revise just our mission statement in general. So I mean, this is a good time for us as a committee to say, here's that bullet to consider. As we really look to seize on to the ever evolving landscape of DEI.
So I highlighted that and look at that 0.5 and use that as the foundation, and then might want to look at the Constitution of America and look at the references to see if there's something that might move us to what we want to articulate for them to consider. And that should be on our agenda for the next meeting to come up with language. Does everybody agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we went through the Constitution on the next couple of pages. Let's look at page 10. Change the language there. That first paragraph is where I've referenced the values to measure behavior. And that's included on page 11. I also referenced the strategy for the town. And it has the theory on what to look at. What's your reaction to the values to measure behavior? And I would suggest that if we are going to suggest that the select board look at it, that we also engage in that exercise and measure our own behavior, and we should talk about it so that we've had that conversation when we present to them.
So is the exercise to rank these according to our own personal values?
Yes, that's correct. When you're looking at page 11, you have chapters from the book that's referenced at the bottom. That's the Lakota Way. The definitions are from the Merriam-Webster. The ART, that's the Addison Reed theory. And they measure my behavior. And then you can categorize your own, whatever you would put as one from the 12 that are listed. And if you're working in an organization, the organization might look at what manages their behavior as well.
This is hard.
It's not easy.
Yeah, I think this is I enjoy any kind of value exercise in marketing. Everyone's looking to either identify, the audience's values and the product's values and where those two intersect. And I think that in an organization such as a municipality where it is our sole job to work with the community, across so many touch points, to understand our values is important. And I think that this will be a good exercise for us and for the town. It's a good moment of reflection.
Great.
Yeah, I think this is great, especially in regards to DEI. They all tie together, so.
If we look at page 12, these are the three theories. And the first one is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the way this is constructed, it's a triangle with the base at the bottom. So if you look at number one, it's the physiology. Maslow created this chart back in 1943 when I was born. And it's been out there to use. However, to be fair about this, the way his exercise works is that you must satisfy the needs for one before you can move to two. So physiology first, safety second, belonging third, esteem fourth, self-actualization fifth at the top. So the base is the widest space of the triangle. And what he stipulates is that you must satisfy the needs for physiology before you can move to safety. You must do physiology safety before you can move to belonging. If you're at esteem and your relationship falls apart, you fall back to looking at belonging again. You can't advance without having the foundation underneath you, is the way he presented his theory. Make sense?
Yes.
Mine is based on how I see human beings. And that when you are born, it doesn't take you very long to figure out whose face is in front of you, and if they smile, you smile. That means that when you're born, you have intelligence, it's there. As you look at the development of the human being, body comes into play when you learn how to be held up or learn how to crawl and begin to use the arms and legs. And so your intelligence is there first and your body becomes second. Values are the third level in my graph because that's when you learn what's your purpose, why are you here, what do you do, and what are your values, which control your behavior. It comes from your parents, it comes from your relatives, it comes from your friends, it comes from people who influence you when you're working. So all of that is what you measure, and you make decisions about whether to participate and engage or you don't. The fourth one coming up is soul, and that is for health challenges and the loss of a loved one. And I'm sharing with you my own experience, and that is my health challenge, and I've shared this with Nick. Back in 2016, I participated in a meeting, answered a question, and then someone questioned me about my answer. We got on the trail and finished the agenda. I thought about it for 2 weeks and then made the decision that I wouldn't go to work. After being absent for 2 weeks, the president wrote me a letter and said, you need to find out why you're not here, and if you don't, in 4 days, we take it as your resignation. I wrote back to him and said I wasn't resigning. However, I did go to see my physician the very next day. And I passed everything about my health, and then she said, let's do more testing. The long story short is 2 months after I had the physical exam, that's when I learned that I'd had surgery given to me by the physician that led the team to remove the tumor from my brain. I had that as a recovery. It took me 18 months to regain my thinking. That's the time that I wrote a book based on my experience and the successes I've had in my life. But I share that with you because there was the challenge to discover what was wrong with me and how to handle it. I had the other incident happen in 2019, and that is when my son passed away. October 8th, 2019, and he was just 44 years old. I've shared this with Nick as well. What a shock that was. Unanticipated. Just slept and never woke up. And he had to be examined by the medical examiner from Boston, and the determination was that it was just his heart didn't last. And that's why I lost him. And how do you recover from that? None of the challenge has been easy. I'm always there to be articulate, to speak and say what's on my mind, to address whatever is before me, and that's how I live my life. So at the top of my triangle, you see that it's resilience. And it's the strength of recovery and any positive attitude that you can have no matter what happens to you in life. I focus on how a human being develops because that's what you do individually as a person. When you move into an organization and you're carrying out a role there, it's different than you are as one human being. It's how you engage and what do you do and how do you deliver what is necessary for that organization to survive. So if you look at the third column, you'll see here that what I've done from the base, number one at the bottom, is the select board, because this is what we're presenting to the select board for them to look at how they are charged and function effectively for the organization. The select board looks at why we are here and what are the creative ideas that we have to address whatever we need to address. For us, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. The select board could say something that's much broader than that. This is a small section of what they're trying to tackle. But you look at the leadership, and that's how you decide what is the focus going to be. The second in command are the Burlington leadership executives. And those are the talents that we have from town and running the organization. The third are the directors, and that's managing the practice and application of what each part of that organization is doing. The fourth is managers, because here you have managers who are looking at the employees to achieve goals. And I provide the formula for doing that with a goal that leads to decision making, which means you evaluate the positive and the negative, the pros and cons. And then based on the decision that you make, then you develop the action steps that are going to be taken and link it to a calendar when successes are going to be geared to succeed. And then evaluate the results. And I've added the fifth step, one that I say to everybody that I support, and that is when you're engaged in achieving goals, the first step you must always take is to evaluate your own self-appraisal. What did you do to achieve? How did you go about it? What are the results? And where did you come out in practicing what needed to be implemented in your own performance? Did you succeed what was expected, or were you short? And if you were short in delivering, why? And you do that for yourself before your upline manager evaluates you. You want it to be fair and connected to everything that you've done, not just what's remembered that you did in the last week or the last 3 months. So that's why when you look at the theory strategy, we have 3 diagrams that we engage in. Any thoughts?
BJ, can I just say thank you for sharing your story? And I'm so sorry about your son. That's really sad.
Thank you. It's not easy, but it's when it happens, and how do you live with it? It's never easy. But
I really appreciate you sharing your stories.
thank you for responding and focusing in on that. And I was just racing to tell you that one of the decisions I made this past summer was to buy a seat on the Burlington Town Common that has my son's name on it. And when you sit in the seat that was put in December, when you look off to the right, that's that raised stage where you can sing up and sing. And sometimes they have a ministry there, or people get married on that stage. And then when you look to the left, that's where the flags are, right across from the fire station. So you know exactly where his seat is. His name is Leon Philip Addison Brathwaite. And so when you find the seat and you're walking through, sit down, have a chat.
I will.
We
That's a
moved
lovely
into this house
tribute.
when he was 1. So this is the place where he grew up. He knows everybody. He went to school here from Pine Glen all the way through high school. Knew everybody in town, played soccer, played basketball, knew everybody by their first name, teased them terribly, which is his way. But it's just a happy person.
That's a lovely tribute. That's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
I will definitely take a seat there when I have a chance.
Have a seat. You know, there's a statement that has his name, and 1976 to 2019, and from family and friends, and love and memory of him, which is great.
I've probably walked by that at some
Good.
point in time. Now I know to, like you said, sit down and reflect.
Yeah. Well, he'll whisper. He'll say something to you.
Thanks for sharing. I echo what Nancy just said.
Thank you. So anyway, the reason that I gave these 2 exercises is that I'm recommending, and I'm hoping that the committee recommends, that the select board engage and look at where are we, what do we think, how do we measure compared to other people that are on the select board. How do we look at what we're doing individually and collectively, and how are we leading the town so that they buy into doing this as well?
These are fun exercises.
Well, that friend BJ made them up. Any other comments about the document?
BJ, I really appreciate all the work you put into this. I was actually thinking about how it works as a committee, because we are bound by open meeting law and other things. How in the future we might collaborate more on documents, maybe previous to like a full committee meeting. So one thing I learned is that we can set up subcommittees. So probably be just 2 people from the committee, but that could allow for more collaboration. Because I don't want you to shoulder the whole, load of work, especially with creating these things. I mean, it's really amazing, but I think also in the interest of streamlining the processes and being more efficient, to collaborate also in a smaller group first and then bringing it to everyone, or even doing it in sections. So that's just an idea for future documents we may need to do.
I appreciate your feedback and your compliment, but I do understand that we're here for 1 year,
Mm-hmm.
and I am anxious to achieve what we need to do. And so I'm open to communicating, but I will continue to produce documents that we can take a look at that can guide us. Nick and I did talk about what does a diversity scorecard look like. I have one that I created. I found it. Don't ask me how, but I found it. I connected with a colleague of mine from the university, and we're going to talk tomorrow morning at 11. This is a scorecard from 2015, so it goes 6 years. And I want to get the go-ahead to be able and use the document without changing. Or if I have to change the name, it's just university and not the name of the university. But it provides an opportunity to look at how the scorecard could be assembled. And we will have the chance to do that. I'll share it with you, so that when we meet on the 16th, we can say items A, B, and E should be included, but C, D, and F should be taken out.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan.
It gives us something to measure to decide what we want to have. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Does.
From a scorecard perspective, that makes sense in terms of next steps because you're the closest to that particular piece. I do agree with Nancy, though. I think that you should not, and should continue to singularly, shoulder the burden of putting documents together. That should fall on all of us, and I think it would make things more expeditious moving forward in terms of review. So if the rest of the committee agrees to that, as we identify documents that need to be drafted, we can create individual subcommittees and we can begin to work on those, and share in that, offline burden, if you will.
Nick, what's your understanding about a shared Google Doc that we could collaborate on? And
So
in regard to open meeting laws.
Yeah, it's a real mixed bag. Open meeting law doesn't really define, how that kind of works. I know that other committees have kind of, danced with it to try it out. I'll check in with town council and see what they say. Because if I'm picking up what you're putting down, if it was just a shared document that we could all view in and comment at, over the course of time, we wouldn't have to burden ourselves with an hour and a half review. We could just, make our comments and then have a public discussion about those comments and, our decision process in a setting like this.
Yeah, I mean, just to ease the burden on BJ, the production of the document could be done online, and then the discussion, well, I don't know, I think maybe it's something we should consider just to ease the burden.
So I will say that if it was a subcommittee, so say it was, you and Nancy working on a document, right? Because you're a subcommittee, you can work in a Google Doc all you want because the subcommittee isn't having a quorum discussion. If all of us were in the Google Doc, then I think that's the gray area because now we're technically kind of having a discussion by making decisions.
Sure.
But I'll ask town council.
Next meeting date? Wednesday, 16th February, 6 o'clock. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
In terms of updates, BJ, when do you think that we'll see a revised version of this for review before we vote on it?
On the one we talked about today, the 13-page report.
Yes.
I'll send that to you tomorrow.
Okay. And then for the 16th, the goal would be to, well, I guess the goal would be to, where are my notes? Just lost them. Discuss the scorecard, the draft language for the mission statement, and then consider a vote on the overall document itself.
The two exercises also, right?
Yes.
And we'll do those offline and then share in the meeting.
Do what offline?
The two exercises.
Yes. So I have the scorecard, draft language for the mission statement, 2 exercises, and the final first quarter report. Correct?
That sounds right to me.
So I'll get the final out to you tomorrow. Take a look at that. Anything you want to shoot to me to include, remember, Carl should get a copy and I get a copy of any language you want us to consider.
So sorry to interrupt you, BJ, but I already added some suggestions in the chat here.
Anything that's in the chat, I put into the minutes right now, just
Perfect.
as suggested edits.
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent.
I'm taking out the 10 commandments.
And then Nancy, in terms of the data sets and the graphs, I guess
Got it.
we'll circle back with
Yeah.
Joanne first before we finalize.
I think the employee data is okay. I think I don't have the 2010 census stuff, so I think BJ, you said you could send that to me.
Yeah. The data that I had on the report was based on the census data for Boston, Massachusetts, and US.
Yeah, and we had talked about adding the Burlington numbers in that same table.
Yeah. Wrote Joanne on my notes twice, just so I don't forget. Anything else?
Well, I don't know who said that we weren't going to get this in one night, but way to go, team! Like that was a strong review. 13 pages.
Well, and I do want to get you a copy of the scorecard. You can take a look at that because that's 39 pages.
Wow.
Awesome.
Okay.
Just in case you think you're going to slow down.
That's
No,
good. That's good. It's important to know that there's a lot of pages.
39 pages. I mean, when you're going to look at an organization, that's how you have to do it. You have to dig.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And when you get the scorecard, you'll notice, for example, where we're looking at some of the numbers are in blue and others are in red. Beside that, it says that if it increased, it's in blue. If it has gone down and it's red, it means that somebody made a mistake. And I will say to you that once it was done annually and I had the data in the report, I shared it with the people who reported to the president 1 month in advance of when he received a copy. And the reason for that was that they had to understand the errors that they made and then be able to address it when they met with him. Now, I'm not saying that's what would happen here in the town, but we'll see. Because this isn't something you do one time and you walk away from it and think you'll be free for the next 30 years. Won't happen. So it'll be a lot to absorb.
Looking forward to it.
Go ahead.
I was saying I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Done, Carl. Night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you for the lively discussion.
You're
Absolutely.
welcome. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.